So, because of where he stands.
John, how you doing? All right?
I'm doing well. Ron, how are you doing?
All right.
Okay. That leaves that sufficient. Tony, he steps on over here, so he's going to be off the frame a bit. So let's see. There's that one. You know, what if we were to see? Let's try that. Okay. Hey, trying to make sure. I've been told that Dale likes to step way off camera.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he doesn't teach here.
Yeah.
I'm banking on him right here, and he can move to here and still be seen.
Yeah.
But if he steps over here,
He very rarely goes that far.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save. Well, I didn't make any changes there. Okay. And it's ready for him to start recording. All right. I don't know if Brother Nip's gonna be here. So let's see. Let's see.
Someone smells really nice. Is that your aftershave or something? Or I know Jeremiah just walked by. He smelled really good too. So.
Well, I have a Scentsy pod that I turned off when I first got here.
Yeah.
So it could be that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The thing that Tommy's allergic to. There's Tommy's allergies. It's more like it aggravates his asthma. People don't realize he has asthma.
Yeah.
That's why he gets it down really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Are you done here? Okay.
Dare I ask how your mom is doing?
Well, I haven't talked to her today. She was supposed to get her permanent cast on today.
Well, 'cause,
So probably not too well.
I guess she had the surgery to heal before they could actually put a cast on.
They had to take stitches off.
the stitches on.
So
From
she
the
got
surgery
those,
for
yeah,
what they
right.
did.
So they took those off today and they were supposed to put her in a permanent cast. So
How long she had to wear that then?
I
Oh,
have
tell
no
'em.
idea. Probably at least a good month or so.
I would think, yeah.
I had a friend at work that broke the same type that she did, and she was gone from work for 2 months.
Oh my.
And she's back. She's got her cast off, but it swells up all the time. So
I heard somebody talking. I was like, is that Florence back here?
is it? Do I sound like my mom?
Well, out in the hallway, I just hear
A
a
smidgen.
voice. I knew it wasn't Donna.
And I had a call today, and the guy was like, "Are you country?" You're from the South, aren't you? And I said, "Yes, sir." And his call dropped. And I was like, "Are you offended?" So I called him back, and he was like, "I'm so sorry, my call dropped. I actually hit the wrong button on my phone." I said, "Oh, I thought you were mad because I was a Southerner and you didn't want to talk to a Southerner." And he goes, "Oh no, I like that."
Well, I'm Southern. I'm from Southern California.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. So she got her stitches or the staples or whatever
Supposedly,
out.
I haven't talked to her, but she was supposed to get them out
No,
today
that's what,
and put on a permanent cast.
yeah. I haven't ever had a permanent cast before, but I had family, son had it, a permanent cast. It drove him crazy.
She has.
Well, it's not
on her-
permanent,
on her
permanent, but I
foot.
mean,
Well, that's where Mike had his on his foot.
permanent, she's not gonna wear it forever, but just,
No, it's not
I know what you meant.
forever. It's just a. It's,
I know what you meant.
It's not like a
Yeah.
split type.
Yeah.
I noticed that. And Tuesday morning class, Pat sits here.
Pat who?
Pat, McBride.
Oh,
sits
does she?
where I sit.
Uh-huh.
I wonder if I took her spot. She used to come. I know I did over there. When I was there, when I first, on Tuesday morning, I came to class sometimes, and I was over there. The McBride sat in that corner over there.
Over there?
But not anymore. She usually sits right there or there now.
Trouble.
Trouble? Trouble?
Can I leave my book in your
You're
car?
missing a chair.
Oh, I think
Use the
there's
four
one
chairs
in the
there up
ladies'
there.
room.
Simpson, what'd you do it?
In the, no, in the,
I don't know.
Right on that
Okay.
table?
yeah. I figured that was somebody's.
Maybe it's over there, in the office.
It's John's fault, right? Okay. I don't need it. I can't sit and pour it one in at once anyway.
Are we learning a dance move or something?
Huh? No, I was almost off balance. I had to catch myself, you know.
I thought you were doing some ballet or something. Gonna get out the tutu for you and all.
Yeah, it took a little while to gain my balance again. without going into the camera.
Yeah.
Right.
I could have just put my arm out there. Huh?
Yeah.
But that's not as exciting, you know.
Then it would have gone through the wall and, okay. Then we had a hole in the wall. We'd have to say it's Jensen's fault.
It's early, isn't it?
Oh,
I got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Whatever you're doing, hurry up.
Dennis Rollins is moving the elders meeting to the 17th instead of this Sunday. Because Ron's gonna be gone. How did you?
You okay?
Yeah.
No.
Or your dad to give to your mom. If she was here, I was gonna mail,
Ron's taking
I was
Mike to
gonna mail
California on the 31st.
it. He'll just give it to her for me. Send me a stamp. That way she'll get it sooner.
Ron is gonna be gone Sunday,
Okay.
this weekend, so we'll have it on the 17th. Okay?
That's a week later.
Right. All right?
Not a problem.
Okay.
Like that jacket, Dale. That's sharp.
You like this?
Think it fit me?
It's not keeping you warm.
Ooh, that is
Think it
nice.
fit me?
Yeah, it's too big for me, so it fits you. Here, you want to try it on?
No, that's all right.
You're gonna make me try it on now.
But I sure like it though.
That's nice. You like it. You
You
like
know what?
that.
I may have, where'd it go? Where'd it go? Yeah, put it in there. I may have one at home that's bigger than that
Oh,
one.
man.
And if I do, I'll just give it to you.
Boy, I know this is like, whoa, huh? That's a
Yeah.
nice one.
And I may have a bigger one at home. If I do, I'll just give it to you.
That is nice.
I'll see if I don't have a bigger one.
God bless you if you do. Even if you don't, God bless you. I like that.
Oh, but the
Thank you,
war one,
thank you.
too.
That's not keeping you warm? Seriously?
Yeah, no, it's not keeping me warm, but I'm cold. Hey, Pat.
It's not even snowing out.
Hi, Pat.
Hi.
When I was younger, I had one just like that, but it was camel hair.
Camel hair?
Yeah, that was a really expensive one.
Oh, I bet.
Camel hair is, whew.
See,
That's when I was skinny.
Here's what's interesting, Isaac, is that the older you get, the more you like warm weather.
I don't know if that's true or not. I've always liked it.
I ain't there yet, Dale, but I'm close.
I can remember going into, well, when I was a young man in Ardmore, Oklahoma, We had some neighbors there, elderly neighbors, and he had a wooden leg,
35?
and they were in their 80s. Now I'd go over to their house in the wintertime, it'd be 80 degrees in that house, and I said, man, it's hot in here. And he said, it feels good, doesn't it?
Well, he has 35 up there, so I'm not for sure.
And I'm convinced the older you get, the more that warmth feels.
Yeah, it is 35, yeah.
It is
It is cold.
35?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It seems cold
I
tonight,
thought
but
it was
Very
that
cold.
much.
it's cold outside.
I'm gonna take my
It's an
coat off.
adjustment.
Cold.
I gotta see if this thing's gonna work. If it doesn't, I'm gonna have to work on it. Yeah, gonna
I
have to
had
work.
my seat warmers on
Okay.
and my AC or
As
my
long as you
heater
know how to
aid.
do that.
Well, I gotta,
35?
I gotta,
Sometimes
Yes.
I can figure it out.
I think
there we go.
I finished on
Okay, record.
88, page 88.
Alright, we got the record on.
Well, I forgot the pen. I'm gonna date these, maybe I can keep up with them.
Ha! Take that.
A wall over there, huh?
Okay. I'll take that one.
We're kind of all split
Yeah,
out.
thank you,
It's a
that's
surprise.
from me.
That's what?
That's from me.
Last week
That's
we
for
were all
Tommy and me for
inside.
card for
Only one
cards.
person was
Okay.
up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she does have some toothpick holders for you.
Oh, she did, oh, I was gonna mention it to her. And
We got that before she decided to.
well, I wasn't gonna bring it up.
I
Yeah,
don't
for
think she
episode.
decided
Hello,
to
Maxine.
do that, Dad.
You got it?
Well, hi, Maxine.
I did.
She thinks she'll be here Sunday, so that'd
Oh,
be a good
good.
thing. She got her stitches out today.
Oh, good.
Did you put a cast on yet?
No, they actually put a brace on.
A brace.
Yeah, he said because he put that plate in there, that's holding the bone steady and everything, and he wants her to exercise that wrist so that it doesn't,
Step up.
and so he put a brace on her.
But the plate stays in, right?
Yeah, the plate's gonna stay in. She's the bionic woman now.
Every flag is there.
Those metal detectors go off now.
That
Yeah.
would be less irritating in the long run because of the cast. It doesn't itch you. And the energy.
Well, she's happy about that too.
Forget about it. Don't forget when you go through those airplanes, tell them. She's got metal.
Oh, no. We won't go through and surprise
Oh,
them.
Mom will probably get scared because she'll forget.
Nah,
Don't do that to her.
you go through and it sounds off and they say, she just sticks her arm up and says, scan it. Hello, Pat.
You and Abbott will probably scare her if it goes off, knowing her.
We're in Genesis, the 35th chapter. We're going to begin at verse 16 tonight. This is where we have Rachel, who will die and has named her son Benjamin. And actually named him a name, Ben-Oni, which means you killed me. And so we're going to look at that. And your handout is page 88. Capital letter I is where we will begin tonight. I don't have too many updates other than the fact Jesse Kemp is home with pneumonia. So certainly want to keep Jesse in your prayers. Pneumonia is not a good thing. Of course, a young man can usually get through with it, whereas us older folks we might have a more difficult time with pneumonia. Which suggests that Jesse didn't get his pneumonia shot.
I did.
Is there such a thing?
I didn't know there was such a thing for pneumonia shots.
Yes, in fact, you're supposed to get 2 pneumonia shots.
I didn't know that.
If you get the first one, and then a few months later you get the second one, and that's supposed to take care of you for about 10 years. So, if you're not doing that, you should do it. And Florence learned something else yesterday. She went to the GI doctor, and because she had 2 doctor's appointments yesterday and 1 today, and she sat down with Dr. Kakish, and he said, you're good for a long time for your colonoscopy. And then she mentioned her sister, and he said, oh, I'll see you in 2.5 years. Every 5 years.
Yeah.
He said, if you have an immediate family member that has died of colon cancer before the age of 60, you're a
Good candidate.
big candidate. Yeah.
So
So,
mother has to do it every 2 years too.
Yeah.
You gotta worry about it too.
I'm a generation below. I'm good, right?
you,
I know.
you turn 50, you need to get your first one.
I'm way far away from 50. I'm young.
Uh-huh.
waiting for her.
I'm away from 50 also.
So that's the only announcement I have, except remember Wilma Payne too, still going through chemotherapy, and we certainly want to keep her in our prayers as well. Jensen, you want to lead us in prayer tonight?
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for all your many wonderful blessings. We thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be able to gather here this evening to study another portion of your word. Please be with us as we go through this study, that we have open minds and open hearts, and that we learn how to apply it in our lives to become better servants for you. Please be with those who are mentioned, and let us have the ability to be able to assist them, or in any way that we can to help them through these tough times. Please be with all those who are assisting them and treating them, that the treatments that they receive that they will recover from their ailments. And forgive us of our sins and repent of them. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
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 I did mention last Wednesday night that if you have no objections, we'll continue our study in the book of Exodus, since it's a good follow-on to Genesis. But if you have something else, please let me know, but don't wait too long, because I've already started doing some work on Exodus. All right, in Genesis, the 35th chapter, beginning at verse 16, and let's read verses 16 through 19. Jensen, would you like to start tonight?
Okay, Genesis 35:16-19.
Yes, please.
Then they journeyed from Bethel, and when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath, Rachel labored in childbirth, and she had hard labor. Now it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, you will have this son also." And so it was, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar on her grave, which is a pillar of Rachel's grave to this day.
Okay. It wasn't too long ago that Jacob had just finished burying Deborah, and now he's involved in a second funeral, if you will. It is ironic, though, that Rachel, who earlier had proclaimed she would die if she had no children, back in Genesis the 30th chapter and verse 1, and who gave to her firstborn the name Joseph, implying a yearning for another son, in Genesis 30 verses 22 through 24. Donna, you want to read that for us, please?
So I get down to it.
Yeah, Genesis
I
30.
read it 1, so hold on.
Well, you can read verse 1 also, and then read 22 through 24.
I'm going to go back up then. Then Jacob, wrong one. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she became jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die."
And then 22 through 24.
Then God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb. So she conceived and bore a son, and said, "God has taken away my reproach." She named him Joseph, saying, "May the Lord give me another son." Now it came upon, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away, that I may go to my own place and to my own country. Give me..."
No, that's good enough.
Well, I said 34. You said 24.
No, 22 through 24.
I paused, and you didn't say anything, so I thought I was supposed to go on.
Well, Jensen went one verse past too, so I just figured y'all were going one verse extra tonight. So here's the deal. What Pat? Here's the thing. In verse 1, Rachel had made the comment that she would die if she had no children, and so she gave her firstborn the name Joseph, so implying a yearning for another son. Now she's having her second son, and she would die at the birth of this second son. It is the gift of children that ultimately killed her. She names this son Benoni, as I mentioned earlier, which means son of my sorrow, as she dies. Jacob would mercifully rename this son Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. However, the character of Rachel stands clear in the naming of this son. She gave him a name that would remind him and everyone else that his mother died giving birth to him, which is kind of sad when you think about it. But in essence, she named him I Killed Mom, a deplorable and an inexcusable act. Do what?
What's your name mean? I killed Mom.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Well, those of us who've had children, we can kind of understand that just a tad.
Just a tad.
Yeah.
However, you know, you see stories today about mothers who have found out that they had cancer or whatever, and the doctors have told them that, you know, we can treat you, but your child, your unborn child, will not survive as a result of it, and the mother chooses to give birth to the child rather than saving her own life. And I've seen recent stories of that, and that's commendable. This was not the case with Rachel, though. She, in her waning days, if you will, died as a result of this son and named this son basically I Killed Mom.
It is worth it. I should say that in case my daughter. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it stands for Benjamin, it stands as a reminder that his mother died giving birth to him. All right, look at Genesis 35, verse 22. Maxine, you want to read that?
And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12.
Okay, and then of course we have the list of the sons and everything following that and everything. But as you see up here in verse 22, within families it is possible for children to commit grievous sins against their parents. And we'll look at Genesis 49 verses 3 and 4 in just a moment. But the idea is that the motivation for this act is not given, nor whether Bilhah was a willing participant or was raped. But this event serves to explain why Reuben is never respected as the family leader, either among the brothers or by Jacob. It also prepares us for the blessing or lack thereof that Reuben will receive in Genesis the 49th chapter, verses 3 and 4. Pat, you had that?
Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and my beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power, unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed, and then you defiled it, and he went up to my couch.
Okay. So it seems as though all of Jacob's post-return woes are neatly packaged up into 2 chapters when you think about it. First we have Dinah's defilement, Simeon and Levi's vengeance, Deborah's death, Rachel's death, Reuben's incest here, but the hardest trial, the deceit of his sons as they sell Joseph into slavery, is yet to come. So Jacob's had some rough times, and he's going to continue to have some rough times here. Any comments on verse 22? All right, look at verses 27 through 29 then. And in your handout, this is capital letter N on page 88. Okay? So, let's read 27 through 29. Stephanie?
Then Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or Kirjath Arba, this is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had dwelt. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. So Isaac breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people, being old and full of days, and his son Esau and Jacob buried him.
Okay. As I have up here, some individuals are blessed to be present when a parent passes from this life. Most of us have lost a parent or a relative and everything. Some of us may not have been as fortunate to be there whenever that individual passed away. it is a blessing. I was there when my mother had her stroke and she passed away, and I knew she wasn't going to make it. So my brother and my sister was there, and I leaned over to her and I told her, I said, "You've had a rough life," because her first two husbands died. My father died when I was 21 years of age, killed in a fire, and it just happened he was in the hospital in Amarillo, and I was in college, but we had gone that weekend. In fact, Florence was with me. We weren't married yet, but we stayed with one of my cousins there at the house, my mother and Florence and I. And that early morning, the hospital called and said that my dad had passed away. So I wasn't there when he passed away, but I was there to see him the day before. And I can remember that he asked Florence to rub his head, and she did that. My mother, when she passed away, and like I say, my brother and my sister was there, and I was able to lean over to her and tell her, "You've had a rough life. We'd love for you to stay here on earth, but if you feel like you need to go, go." And I can remember a tear coming down her cheek when that happened. And yet she wasn't able to respond. She wasn't in a coma, but she was pretty well out of it. I was kind of fortunate to be around when Lansing was in his last days and spent a lot of time with him. I was there with Arnie when he spent a lot of time in the hospital. In fact, I went and I visited every day with him. And that's a tough situation, but it's really kind of a pleasure to be with these individuals. And I can remember having conversations with Lansing and Arnie and telling them that your days are numbered and you're going to be going home to your Heavenly Father. And we had those conversations. Well, here's a situation here where we see this blessing here because Isaac was 180 years of age when he died. If Jacob had deceived Esau, as some suppose, back in Genesis 33rd chapter and verses 13 through 17, which we won't take time to read that, there is no lingering strain on their relationship. Either the death of their father cures all wounds, or Jacob had not acted as deceitfully as some would suggest. Here's the two brothers together. It is suggested that Isaac lived about 12 to 15 years after Joseph was sold into slavery. However, it is generally allowed that the death of Isaac is mentioned here out of its chronological order, as several of the transactions mentioned in the succeeding chapters, when we look at chapters 37 and 38, must have happened during his life. But that the history of Joseph might not be disturbed, his death is anticipated in this place. And so we see it here. And so we see the map here of Hebron. This is where they're located. Bethel, and then go down here, here's Bethlehem, and here's Hebron. And this is where this was taking place here. If you look at verse 27 again, then Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had dwelled. Okay? And then we look at the sons of Jacob here. And again, I mentioned that when you look at the ancestor of Jesus, I tried to put these in red. You had Jacob, or Israel, you have Leah, wife of Jacob, and you have Judah. These are the sons, though, that he's had. Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, Bilhah, I misspelled that, obviously, Zilpah, Leah's maid, and this, of course, was Rachel's maid. And then you have Leah here, her children, her sons. Any comments or questions? All right, let's look at chapter 36 then. In chapter 36, Victor Askew, he gives it the title, The Generations of Esau, and so I use that title, but he also looked at the possibility of Esau, the father of Edomites, or Esau becomes a mighty nation, or the rise of Edom. And he uses Genesis 36 verse 1. Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom, as the key verse. And then, of course, the outline. So we'll look at the information here, the lessons that we can learn from this. First off, the brotherhood of Jacob and Esau, living on the nations of Edom and Israel, is never forgotten in the Old Testament. This chapter, chapter 36, with its painstaking detail, is a witness to this sense of kinship, which will later come to surface in context of diplomacy, law, and national feeling. Look at Numbers, the 20th chapter, and verse 14. Let's see. Ron?
Now Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Thus says your brother Israel, you know all the hardship that has befallen us.
Okay. And what we're looking at here is the Edom here, and of course Israel we'll look at in a moment. But let's look at Deuteronomy 23 and verse 7. Isaac, you had that?
You shall not harbor an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not harbor an Egyptian, because you are an alien in his land.
Okay, and then we go to Obadiah, verses 10 and 12, or 10 through 12. Jensen, we're back to you.
Oh, that's me.
Yes, sir.
Obadiah 10:12. That is Obadiah, right?
Yes, I think.
Oh, 10, first says 10 through 12.
Yes.
With a dash, not a colon. That helps. Okay. Got here it is. For violence against your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. In the day that you stood on the other side, in the day that strangers carried captives his horses, when foreigners entered his gates, and cast lots for Jerusalem, even you were as one of them. But you should not have gazed on the day of your brother, in the day of his captivity, nor should you have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor should you have spoken proudly in the day of distress.
Okay, so again, what we're seeing here is that when you look at the brotherhood of Jacob and Esau, living on in the nations of Edom and Israel, throughout the Old Testament, it's never forgotten. Okay? Let's look at verses 2 and 3 of chapter 36. Donna, you want to read that for me, please?
Esau took his wives from the daughters of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, the daughter of Anna, and the granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite. Also Basemath, Ishmael's daughter, the sister of, I have to go long word.
You did well there, Donna.
No.
You did well. All right, in your handout, that's capital letter B on page 90. Okay? So what we have here is the Canaanite wives were previously recorded as Judith and Basemath. Go back to Genesis 26 and verse 34. Maxine, look at that, if you will.
And Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beerah, and the Hittite, and the Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite.
Okay, and then also when we look at Genesis 28 verse 9, we see Ishmael's daughter as Mahalath. Pat, you had that?
So Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebajoth, to be his wife in addition to the wives he had.
All right, so as I have up here, one's mate plays an important part in one's offspring. There's three solutions that may be found to this problem. The first solution is, the simplest explanation is that the list have suffered in transmission, but there may also have been some alternative names like Esau's own nickname when Esau was given the nickname Edom, okay? The second solution would be an even simpler explanation, which lies in the truth that Genesis does not claim to be an exhaustive history of Esau. Thirdly, there is no reason to believe that Esau did not have more wives than those listed in chapters 26 and 28. And for whatever reason, they are omitted from this genealogy, while later wives were included. And so that's what we look at in verses 2 and 3 here in chapter 36. I personally vote for the alternative names given here in chapter 36, verses 2 and 3. Anybody have any other thoughts on that? Just as Esau was given an alternative name, these wives were given an alternative name as well, is what I'm suggesting, okay? All right, look at verses 6 and 7 then. Stephanie?
Then Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the persons of his household, his cattle, and all his animals, and all his goods which he had gained in the land of Canaan, and went to a country away from the presence of his brother Jacob. How far?
Just verses 6 and 7.
For their possessions were too great for them to dwell together, and the land where they were strangers could not support them because of their livestock.
Okay. In your handout, that would be capital letter C on page 90. All right? And as I have up here, it seems that Jacob came to Esau, but Esau made the decision to part from his brother. Even after making peace with one another, they buried their father, they were together in this burial. Jacob and Esau do not dwell together in the promised land. Esau, in keeping with his loss of birthright and blessing, concedes Canaan to his brother and moves his people to the southeast. Here we find the motive for Esau's move. The reason they could not dwell together in Canaan, and this was similar to the situation between Abraham and Lot, back in Genesis 13th chapter, verses 5 through 9. Ron, let's go ahead and read that. I know that we're familiar with it, but let's go ahead and read the situation between Abraham and Lot.
Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelled in the land. So Abram said to Lot, Please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left.
So likewise here Jacob and Esau have now separated or parted ways. And although Esau is outside the covenant promise, God's blessing extends to him in two ways. Number one, children. Go back and look at verses 4 and 5. It says, Now Adah bore Eliphaz to Esau, and Basemath bore Reuel, and Aholibamah bore Juash, Jalem, and Korah. These were the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. Okay, and also Esau had prosperity too. When you look at verses 6 and 7 again, then Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the persons of his household, his cattle, and all his animals, and all his goods which he had gained in the land of Canaan, and went to a country away from the presence of his brother Jacob, for their possessions were too great. Same thing with Abraham and Lot. Their possessions were too great for them to dwell together, in the land where they were strangers could not support them because of their livestock. I can't remember now. I used to know, but if I remember right, it takes 5 acres of grass for one cow to survive. Yes. And so you can imagine how much land these individuals had based on their possessions, their livestock, their cattle, their sheep, probably some donkeys. So they had to separate their ways, and they did it, in this case, peacefully. And God allowed Esau to prosper, even though he was not in the promise, same promise as Jacob. So we look at the descendants of Esau, and here they are. He had a number of children, and so God did bless him in children, and he blessed him in property as well. Any comments or questions? Yes, Pat.
Then the name Oholibama and those two women's names, aren't they brought up later on in the Old Testament to represent degradation or? I don't know where I remember that from, but it seems like those two names stuck in my mind.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on it right now. Your question's a good question. Ron, do you know?
No, I don't.
I'll research that a little bit, Pat, because I don't have an answer for you right now. Your question's a good question, though, so let me look at that, all right?
Okay.
And I promise I'll get back to you next week on these two wives. All right, so let's look at verses 11 and 12 of Genesis 36. Isaac?
And the sons of Eliphaz was Timon, Omar, Zebo, Gatam, and Kenaz. Now, Timah was a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bore Amalek to
Eliphaz.
Yeah. These were the sons of Ada, Esau's wife.
Well, I'm getting some tough names for you guys.
I'm glad you didn't name me one of these.
You're gonna send it to Ron.
So, no, you did fine there. You did fine. Capital letter E in your handout, page 90. Esau was responsible for the Amalekites, bitter enemies of Israel. And that's what I have up there, okay? So, the Timonites were renowned for valor and wisdom. Eliphaz, the Timonite, was one of the chief friends of Job, whom some identify with Joab. Look at verse 33 specifically. It says, and when Bela died, Joab, son of Zerah of Bozrah, reigned in his place. And some would suggest that Job was identified with Jobab. Okay? As the offspring of a concubine, Amalek does not come under the umbrella of Edom's protected status with Israel. Go to Deuteronomy, the 23rd chapter, if you will, and look at verses 7 through 9. Jensen?
Verses 7 to 9? Oh,
yes, Deuteronomy.
It was, my pad wasn't reacting.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Deuteronomy 7, verses 7 to 9.
Yes.
The Lord did not set his love on you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any other people, for you were the least of all people. But because the Lord loves you, and because he would keep the oath which he swore to your fathers, the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt.
All right, where did you read?
Deuteronomy 7, verses 7 through 9.
That's close. I want the 7 through 9, but try 23, chapter 23.
Oh!
That's a good reading, though.
23, 7 through 9.
Yes, please.
Okay. Not shorter. You shall not abhor the Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor the Egyptian, because you were an alien in his land. The children of the third generation born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord. When the army goes out against your enemies, then keep yourself from every wicked thing.
All right. So as I was saying here then, when you look at this, as the offspring of a concubine, Amalek does not come under the umbrella of Edom's protected status with Israel. And this is what we find in Deuteronomy 23, verses 7 through 9. The Amalekites are punished for their treacherous, unprovoked aggression against Israel during her Exodus journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. Let's go and look at Exodus, if you will, the 17th chapter, and we're going to look at verses 8 through 16. Donnie, you want to read that much?
Sure. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. Joshua did as Moses told him and fought against Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So it came about, when Moses held his hand up, that Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus his hands were steady until the sun set. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this in a book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Moses built an altar and named it, The Lord is my banner. And he said, the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation.
So you see then that Amalek was indeed punished for their treacherous and unprovoked aggression against Israel. We could also go to Judges, the 3rd chapter. And Stephanie, read verse 13 and then turn over to the 6th chapter and read verses 3 through 5 and verse 33, if you will.
You skipping over 2 people?
I'm sorry, Maxine.
Okay. 3 to 13 I've got.
Okay.
Gathered unto him and the children of...
I just want you to read verse 13 now of chapter 3. Judges chapter 3, verse 13.
That's it.
Okay.
And he gathered unto him and the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel, and possessed the city of palm trees.
Now go to chapter 6, if you will, and read verses 3 through 5 for me.
And so it was, when Israel had sown, that the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites, and the children of the east, even they came up against them. And they encamped against them, and destroyed the increase of the earth, till thou come unto Gaza, and left no substance for Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor ass.
Okay. Now we're not going to read verse 33 or chapter 7 verse 12 or chapter 10 verse 12 either, because we already get the picture here of what's taking place with the Amalekites. They are indeed an evil bunch of people, and they are being punished for their treacherous and unprovoked aggression. Samuel commands Saul to annihilate the Amalekites. When Saul spares Agag, their king, Samuel himself slays him. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 15, okay? Which we'll not read the whole chapter, but it remains for Mordecai, another descendant of Kish, in 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1, and Esther chapter 2, verse 5, to destroy Haman the Agagite. Esther chapter 3, verse 1, which we'll not take time to read those either, and verse 10. And then chapter 8, verse 3 and 5, and chapter 9, verses 23 through 25. So presumably an Amalekite, as identified by Josephus, is where I got that information, okay? Any comments through verse 12? We're going to jump on down to verse 20 of chapter 36. Pat, you want to read that for me? Chapter 36, verse 20.
These were the sons of Sarah, the Horite, who inhabited the land: Lotan, Shobal, Zebron, Ani, Dishon, These are.
No, just verse 20 is all I need. I don't want you to have to read all those names. You're doing a good job, though.
That's verse 20.
Do what?
That was verse 20.
Well, you were starting to read verse 21, though.
No, I wasn't. Oh, was I?
Yes.
Yeah.
The numbers are teeny tiny and pale.
They are. They are.
No, in my Bible they are.
No, you're correct. They are small. In your handout, this would be capital letter F, where I had the Horites were the pre-Edomite population of the South Country. And we'll go to Deuteronomy, the 2nd chapter, in just a moment. But the sons of Seir are here mentioned partly because of their alliance with Esau's family. And I don't have these scriptures up there, but you go back and you look at Genesis chapter 35 and verse 2, where it says, "And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves and change your garments." And then you look at verse 20. In verse 20 of chapter 35 says, "And Jacob set a pillar on her grave, which is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day." And verse 22 says, "And it happened when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12, and of course you had the sons listed." Verse 24 says, "The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin." And verse 25, "The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, were Dan and Naphtali." The point is that the sons of Seir are here mentioned partly because of their alliance with Esau's family, and partly because the government was translated from his to Esau's family. And this is what we're seeing here in chapter 36 and verse 20 when it says, again, "These were the sons of Seir, the Horite, who inhabited the land, Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, and Anna." That phrase, "who inhabited the land and ruled there till Esau and his posterity drove them out." Go to Deuteronomy, the 2nd chapter, and look at verse 12. Stephanie?
The Horites formerly dwelt in Seir, but the descendants of Esau depossessed them and destroyed them from before them.
And then read verse 22.
You want me to finish 12?
Yes, please.
Okay. "And dwelt in their place, just as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave them."
22.
"Just as he had done for the descendants of Esau, who dwelt in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites from before them, they depossessed them and dwelt in their place, even to this day."
All right. So here's a map, or not a map. This is the sons of Seir, the Horite, and the kings of Edom, if you will. And I didn't complete the spelling there on Horite. I'm sorry about that. But you can see there were a lot of sons there. And then the kings of Edom down here, Bela, Jobab, Husham, Hadad, Samlah, Saul, Bel, Hanan, and Hadar are the kings of Edom. The map, if you will, this is the map showing from Hebron down to Edom. This is where they were, okay? Any comments or questions? All right, so let's look at verse 24 then. Ron, chapter 36, verse 24, please.
These were the sons of Zebulun, both Ajah and Anna. This was the Anna who found the water in the wilderness as he pastured the donkeys of his father Zebulun.
All right, so in your handout, this would be capital letter G on page 91. Men can become known by the deeds that they have performed. And when you see that phrase there, the King James Version says mules, okay, instead of donkeys. But this was the Anna who found the water in the wilderness, is what we read there. American Standard Version and others say hot springs. Okay? They found the hot springs in the wilderness. This is an interesting family history note and the only anecdote in the genealogy. Presumably it would have had meaning to the Israelite audience familiar with the terrain The precise nature of what he found is, however, under some debate by linguist scholars who had also rendered this as mules, some vipers, or water, though many seem to be leaning toward water. All right, that was our final bell, so we will stop here and we'll finish chapter 36 next week.
Indicate where he stopped.
You know, what is it that the name is
Deuteronomy
so...
2:12 on page
Is it
91.
because they were written in Hebrew? Is that why they sound so different in English?
Yeah, sometimes.
Me from the Old Testament for so long, I can't tell you, man. I pushed through it now, though, I do.
Sometimes the translation from the Hebrew and the Greek to English leaves a little bit to be desired. For example, if you looked at the King James Version, it consistently uses the word hell.
Right.
And hell, when you look at the whole deal, can mean either Sheol, Hades, Gehenna, or Tartarus.
That's too right. Yeah.
Because I just do a check or a circle and I go, no, that was gonna be.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well,